Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Alex Willis. I lead BlackBerry's sales engineering team. And if you haven't been following BlackBerry for a while, I know everyone's familiar with BlackBerry being a prominent Canadian company, but we've spent the last 30 years in secure software. Obviously, hardware was big business for us for a long time. But one of the things that made those devices so popular was because of the level of security that we embedded in there. And so what we did about 5 years ago was really expand that to support not only BlackBerry hardware devices, but all devices. And over the last 5 years, we've been adding to our security portfolio. And we're now one of the top 5 cybersecurity companies in the world. We do everything from mobile device management to secure operating systems for cars and other devices. And then we have a really big cybersecurity practice, including software for antivirus, malware, things like that called, we acquired a company a while ago called Cylance that provides that software protection. And then we have managed services around cybersecurity and that sort of thing as well. And so I'm happy to be with you guys today to go over some of the things that we've seen in the field. One of the things that I do in my roles is work with organizations who want to mobilize or go through business transformation, mobile workforce management, those types of things, but they are really sensitive to security issues and they want to do it in a secure way. And then, of course, with the recent changes around COVID-19 and work from home requirements, we've seen a massive increase in people really expediting those types of projects to be able to have their employees work remotely. And so probably a good idea to share some of the things that we've been kind of running into. And, obviously the scale of this is the biggest challenge. Like I said, we've got customers that are doing mobile workforce management already. The ability to do this isn't really new. The challenge is the scale of this. It's everybody has to work remotely everywhere, and it's 100% of our organization and doing a really quick way. So what we're seeing questions wise from our customers and like, what is the challenge? What are they actually trying to do is, part of it, depending on the organization, part of it might be just the ability to continue to communicate using those corporate tools, remote access to email and such. And not only with employees, sometimes it's with partners. If it's if you're part of the local government, it could be also communicating with citizens and first responders. And how do you continue to do that in a secure way, even when employees can't go to the office anywhere? And if you're in an organization that needs to continue service, not only because of the type of service that you deliver, but really just to stay in business. I mean, there's a lot of organizations now that are struggling to be able to provide service in a way. If they can't do it from home, then they just can't provide service, and therefore they struggle with revenue. And taking everybody who works in an office and moving them to remote immediately, the first thing people think of is, we'll just give our employees laptops. And one, that's very expensive, but we're also starting to hear from some of our customers that it's becoming difficult to even buy laptops because the demand has been so strong that inventory is really challenged on that. So that leads to the next question is, if I can't buy laptops for people, do I let them work on their personal computers? And I'll go off script here and kind of add one more here, is I've heard some organizations with the questions of, they're getting questions from their employees, can I take my work computer home? If they don't have laptops, they don't have home computers, can I just go in and get my work computer? And I'm not a health, I'm not a doctor or anything, but that seems risky to me, taking equipment from an environment that may not have been cleaned and bringing it home and possibly introducing infection there, or the other way around, bringing a clean machine into a house and then later bringing it back into work. Seems kind of risky to me. But where people do have home computers, whether it's laptops or desktops, the question is, can I allow them to do that? And the answer is yes. There's some things to consider, but there are ways to do that in a secure and safe way. And one of those ways is just remote access. So there's either working on applications locally on that machine, or using VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure to remote control servers that remain in the data center or in the cloud. So they're basically just using that home computer as a thin client, but there's still potential issues there around security, especially if you require a VPN to get connectivity to that remote server that you're connecting to. The challenge with VPN is that if you allow VPN on a machine that you don't manage, on a network that you don't manage, that introduces a lot of risk, because VPN is a device-wide concept on laptops and desktops. So if I use VPN on my personal computer and connect to my company's network, I'm now exposing my entire company's network to any of the malware or Trojans or anything that's running on the machine that I put them on. So VPN is really meant to be deployed on laptops that you manage, and therefore can dictate or control the level of security that's on those devices. And of course, what if it has malware on it? How do you account for that? Whether you do whatever remote option you choose, you want to make sure that malware isn't on that machine, even if the data that you're using or applications you're using are remote, and the data doesn't live local, which means it wouldn't have the malware wouldn't have access to it. Some malware does things like screen scraping, or take screenshots. It could be taking key logging, so it's taking people's credentials and passwords and things like that. And then phishing attacks. And we're seeing an increase in this, especially as all of the bad guys know that everybody is working home now. The trend in hacking has been shifting away from attacking organizations' firewalls and their servers and moving towards the endpoint for a little while now, because we've kind of all collectively figured out how to secure our firewall and our servers and our back end. And so the security is really good there. The security is much weaker on endpoints, especially on personal endpoints where there may be no protection provided at all. That's where kind of hackers are going. So the main challenges around COVID-19 and the coronavirus situation is, again, scalability. How do I grow that fast, that quick, and do it in a way that not only maintains the level of user experience that our users are requiring to be able to maintain productivity, but do it in a secure, safe way, even if it's on home computers. That brings in a lot of risk, and then of course cost. So trying to do this economically, especially when everyone's challenged these times in terms of maintaining their revenue and their activity. How do you do this in a way that allows you to stay afloat, continue to provide service, and then minimize cost? So before I kind of get into all this stuff, we've only got about 20 minutes, and I'll take some questions. I wanted to provide some additional resources for those of you that you want to dig deeper on this. There's a number of areas where you can gather information like this, but one of the good ones is NIST. They put together standards about kind of everything around security, and I took kind of three that I think are really relevant. One is just basic home networking security tips. And it'll cover things like, if you're adding IoT devices to your network, make sure you change the default passwords out of there right away, pick reputable companies, make sure they're devices that can be updated. These are the kind of risks that you introduce when you allow employees to work from home, especially on home equipment on a home network, because if they're buying consumer grade devices, adding them to the network, those endpoints might end up being the weak link where hackers can hack into. Now they're on the network, and then they can use that laptop or desktop if it's connected, into the company's network, and provide that as a conduit. So you want to provide these tips, and what is a really good idea is, it's difficult to mandate things at someone's home or employee's home, but it is still a good idea to provide tips and tricks that people may not have been aware of, but they're happy to take that advice. And then there's one on working from home. So it kind of brings those together of home equipment and home network security, and then functioning as a remote office worker in that environment. And then there's, of course, the bigger general cybersecurity best practices. This one covers more things like from an enterprise or from a company perspective. It's, identifying the network. It's identifying the main applications or data or processes that you need to function as a company. What's the first priority versus the second priority? What applications produce data? Where does the data go? How is the data secured? Who has access to it? All those types of things are summed up in that general cybersecurity, that best practices document. It's a good read if you're interested in that sort of thing. So one other thing I've been saying to the customers I've been working with is the question around what's it gonna be like going forward. And I see a lot of people kind of struggling to find a solution for this and approach it as a temporary solution to a temporary problem. And while the problem, the shelter in place around COVID-19 is hopefully temporary, the idea of working from home isn't temporary. And I think a lot of companies had kind of pushed back the ability to do this because maybe they had a poor view or a poor perception of working from home. Maybe they think people are going to be distracted at home or their productivity is going to suffer, and for those reasons. But I think we can almost think of this whole thing as a pilot program. And I think organizations are going to realize that productivity doesn't have to suffer. Users are going to have a much better work-life balance, especially not having to sit in traffic for whatever the commute is. So, and this isn't going to be true for everybody, of course, and everybody's role isn't really well suited for working at home. But I think going forward, we'll have much higher percentage of people working from home than we did before. And so the solution to the problem now, it's not much more difficult to do it in a kind of permanent way rather than trying to provide a temporary fix for a temporary problem. And I think, if we do this right, companies can really see some additional benefits, not only to the productivity gain, but cost savings as well. Maybe we don't need such large office spaces, which means electricity bills will be lower, HVAC bills will be lower, and so on. So maybe there's going to be a silver lining out of this situation we find ourselves in. Another thing to consider is how will users adapt. Everybody isn't really well suited for working at home. They're not used to it. Maybe they're going to struggle with the isolation. They may have other distractions at home. To compound the situation, people have their kids at home because schools are closed, they have pets, and that might be hard to manage for some people. And that hopefully is temporary. But as people like me, I'm used to working at home. This really isn't a difference for me. But some people will struggle with the isolation. So what we've been doing at BlackBerry, and I've been recommending to other organizations, is to do virtual lounges. As a permanent remote worker, I'm typically on planes and traveling everywhere, so it is weird for me to not have been on a plane in a month. But it's not unusual for me to be working from home and by myself. But everybody doesn't take it the same way, and because I'm not traveling and meeting with customers and on planes, then what I'm finding is that I'm still feeling a bit isolated. So what we've been doing is these virtual lounges. These are kind of random throughout the week. There's no agenda. We're not trying to talk about work. It's things that you would do in an office on those, 5-minute breaks, those water cooler breaks, if you will, just to get people, in front of other people. We'll turn the video cameras on and we'll have some kind of discussion, check in on people, see how they're doing, and share stories and all that kind of stuff. And that seems to help. I've got really, really positive feedback from employees who really, really like that. We didn't make this a company-wide HR kind of thing because we didn't want people to show up and think it was a lecture or a webinar that they had to join. It was really just optional, small groups, which really encourages better collaboration and communication among that small group. If you put 50 people on there, it's kind of too many, but 5 to 10 people here and there, it seems to work out really well. I also find communication is the key. So when you go through, or if you go through the links that I shared around NIST and cybersecurity, there's really good best practices in there that you can share with users. Cybersecurity training is going to be important. They're going to be working, with corporate data, working at home, some things that they might not have even thought about to cover. But the important thing is to let them know exactly what the policy is, if you have a cybersecurity policy. If you don't, the NIST has really good templates and frameworks to put one together. But basically, things like, what should a user do if they find themselves in a certain scenario? Maybe they get an email that they think might be phishing. First, you have to communicate to them what is phishing and kind of what to look out for. Some of the key things like misspelling in the domain names of emails that come in, or things like that, for people to just raise their level of awareness. But it's important to go past that and let them know exactly what you expect them to do if they find any of those things that you warned them, just as an example. And then just general updates. I think users are feeling, that will help them feel more connected even in isolation. And, I'm getting a lot of that communication from my company, from my city, from my golf club, and everyone's providing updates every day of here's what's happening, here's any policies that have been changed, given new information and guidelines that are coming from the CDC or the local government. All of that is important, even though all of us are inundated with the news and we have a number of streams of this information. It's still good to have these touch points from the company so that they know that things are still working and that their understanding is the same as it was yesterday, or if it needs to change, they have that awareness as well. So in terms of cyber and kind of what to look out for, it's really securing the applications themselves. DLP is data leakage protection, and that's the ability to prevent somebody from, say, highlighting confidential email or words in a work email and then pasting them into a personal application or social media or whatever it is. It's protecting that data from leaking from your secure channels. It's encryption. It's compliance controls. So making sure that compliance are IT policies that will lock down certain capabilities to basically protect users from themselves, protect them from taking risky behavior, and just making it not possible to do it rather than, kind of asking people to do it. Sometimes they do those things by mistake or not thinking, or they just want to get their job done and the tools that have been given to them aren't useful enough or productive enough that they find other ways around it. So that would be compliance controls would protect from that. And then there's the security at the network level. So, how are they gaining access to the corporate applications and corporate data? Again, is it VPN? Is it remote desktop? Is it, are you exposing that data to the internet, which would be a really big risk? And then security on the operating system to make sure that those machines aren't infected with malware that can be used as a Trojan horse to get into your corporate network or steal data or lock data or any of that kind of stuff. So some additional cyber tips. We've been hearing a lot about Zoom recently. We have a secure version of Zoom for our platform that provides enhanced or additional security. But the reason I put this in there, and it's not really to blame Zoom on this, but because part of this is user error. So a lot of the school systems are using Zoom to do their virtual classrooms. And what they didn't think about is making those Zoom conferences private. So that means there's a link to that Zoom meeting. This kind of gets shared with other students. It gets shared otherwise. There's probably so many of these meetings going on now that you can maybe guess the number of the ID for a meeting. And we're seeing these what they call Zoom bombing. So people are just jumping into these meetings. And especially when it's dealing with kids, bad guys are coming in and just making havoc, yelling stuff into the group or something like that. That's kind of a bad thing to happen, especially when you're dealing with kids and keep people yelling profanity. But imagine if it was a confidential work meeting where, competitors or, kind of espionage is going on and people were sneaking into your meetings and, and listening into the confidential information that should be kept private. And there's some other security problems with Zoom and their web links. There's some problem with Windows credentials being leaked through the links that are being shared. It's kind of the approach that they're taking to sharing those links and inviting others to meetings. Really bad stuff. And the only reason I bring that up is to say that, it doesn't matter, if it's what third-party company it is. There still needs to be a little bit of research and checking before you use these applications in production, especially if you have really sensitive data that you work with, whether it's regulatory compliance type stuff like banking and stuff, or it's just highly competitive information that you wouldn't want leaked out. Again, people wanting to take equipment home. Sometimes it's not the computer. Sometimes it's, well, I have a home computer, but my screen is really small. Can I take my desk large screen home with me? And again, that might introduce potential health risk in taking those from one location to another. Cloud services. I've heard organizations say, well, everything I have is in the cloud, so I'm all set, I'm fine. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think cloud services, especially the reputable ones like AWS and Microsoft, they're all really, really good at providing security of that data while it's in their environment. However, if you're allowing access to those cloud systems, those applications from home computers, then you can't control the data leakage on there. So, you know, I'm on my home computer, I'm accessing, I can maybe, you know, save those documents down to my machine. You know, the security in cloud services is in the back end. And usually in the connectivity, the connection between my computer and that cloud resource. But it doesn't do anything to provide additional or ongoing protection for those documents or those files if I allow them to synchronize to my laptop or my home desktop. Once it gets there, now it's exposed and accessible from malware that might be in my home computer, or me as an employee misusing that for either intentional or unintentional uses. So there are additional settings in those cloud services which could prevent that. You know, say I don't let people. I'm going to let people access my cloud resource, but I'm not going to let them download. They can only work with files online. That kind of thing. That'll provide additional protection. Another thing that you'll find on home computers is that people at their houses don't usually do or keep up to date with updates, either from the operating system or for the individual applications like Chrome. And if someone's using a really old version of Chrome, there's a lot of known vulnerabilities that are exposed there. And one mistake that I see a lot of companies make is they figure, well, nobody's going to target me because who am I? No one cares what I'm doing, so no one's going to bother me. Therefore, I don't have to worry about my security posture. And the reality is that's just not how hacking typically works. It does work that way for nation state attacks or espionage, you know, the competitive targeting, of course, that they're all targeted. But in general, for the rest of us, we usually get swept up in kind of what either internet bots or, like, for example, if there's a known vulnerability on a browser, which means that I'm susceptible to a type of attacks based on certain ports and how I connect to the internet. There's bots out there that will just scan the internet for everybody who has that vulnerability, and then it will just randomly pick one to attack. So they may not be targeting you, but that doesn't mean that you won't be swept up in one of these attacks. You know, that's how kind of, you know, the rest of us get attacked. It's just kind of an opportunity that people or the bad guys find on the internet, and then they take advantage of it, and then we're in trouble. And then, of course, we got to understand that, you know, home security, home Wi-Fi security is typically pretty poor for the average person. Again, whether it's, again, not doing the updates on the routers at home, not changing the default password, leaving too many security doors open. So those are all things that you can get from that Nest documentation that I provided. Maybe just share that with everybody to say, look, if you want to work from home, here are the things that we require you to do. And maybe there's another section of, we highly recommend you do these. You know, that's up to you, but the information is there, and it's definitely certain things to consider. So what I wanted to do now is talk a little bit about, you know, given if that's the state, that's what the challenges people are having, that's what where people want to get to, the state they want to get to, how are we doing it? So at BlackBerry, we're providing that assistance. Again, we can do security around mobile phones and tablets and desktops and things like that. But one of the things that's really popular right now is just the ability to work at home, and that means getting access to, you know, my email calendar and PIM, my intranet, you know, my corporate web-based applications, and we have a product for that. So, you know, here's a shameless plug for that. But I wanted to highlight a couple of examples of where we've been able to help organizations with this. You know, the first one here is a health insurance company. This particular company happens to be in India, so they have special, unique kind of challenges there, given power and things like that. But they had a really specific set of requirements. Because they're a health insurance company, they do deal with medical records and really confidential information that they can't let get out, and they needed their employees to be able to work from home. So they wanted to be able to block the ability to download any of that data to personal computers, even restrict the ability to cut and copy data from the like medical records or the insurance files onto home computers to be used wherever. It needed to be web-based. They wanted to limit, to say, yeah, it's web-based. They want access to our internal intranet, but we want to limit what areas of that intranet that they go to. So really limit it to doing just their job for that duration. So they needed the ability to whitelist those URLs. They couldn't depend on VPN because they didn't want to trust VPN installed on personal computers. They wanted to ensure also that any data that was synchronized to the local machine was encrypted while it was at rest, not only in transit, so the connectivity of it, but once that data was downloaded, to make sure that it was encrypted, and they maintained control and visibility of that data once it was downloaded, and have the ability to remotely delete that if they ever needed to, so that person left the company or something like that. And then also they wanted to be able to support mobile users, of course. In this particular organization, we got them up and running in 48 hours. It was a 1,000-user organization, or at least the number of users that needed to do this was 1,000 users. Took about 48 hours, and they had never been a customer before, so it was from zero all the way up there. Then we had a defense agency in the UK. They really just needed the basics. They needed, email and PIM, and they wanted access to their cloud applications, their software as a service applications. And then what they did is they wanted to remote control their existing desks computers. So they didn't have like a farm or virtual machines or anything like that. They just wanted to have remote access to their virtual or to their desktops that they left on their desk, able to set them up and not have to worry about VPN. Again, control, cut, copy, and paste. This company wanted to limit the ability to print, and they wanted to make sure that nobody could take screenshots of corporate data used on personal computers. And then there's just a number of banks that wanted access. A lot of the banks, they already have most of their people set up with the ability to work remotely, but any large company is going to have a number of employees above and beyond that just don't work at home. Maybe HR or finance, those types of roles aren't typical ones that you enable for remote working. But of course now everybody has to work remotely, so they wanted access to web applications, and then they also wanted to limit connectivity of where they go. So here's the shameless plug. And instead of going into too many details about this, I'm just going to show you what it looks like. But this is what we call BlackBerry Digital Workplace. And the functionality that it provides is both online and offline access to email, camera, PIM, and then online access to behind the firewall connected web-based applications. And so the intranet or whatever other web-based applications that you have there. And also just internet applications where, here's another security tip is, accessing SaaS applications. What we do at BlackBerry, for example, we use Office 365 for all of that, all of those applications, but I'm not allowed to connect directly to Office 365 from my home computer. I have to be on a company computer, and I have to be connected to the corporate network through VPN, through my company laptop, which is very locked down and secure. That's the only way our security team will allow access to Office 365. But instead of doing that, if I want to do that on my home computer, I can use this product, BlackBerry Digital Workplace, because the browser in there is secure, and the connectivity that it takes is the same as it would take as if I was VPN'd in. So it's basically as if I'm sitting at my company desk accessing that cloud resource. Even though it's on the internet, I've got to make a connection to my company network first. And it secures all of the data once it's local. And we included our BlackBerry Protect, which is our antivirus and malware software in there. So as I install this single application to get this productivity, I'm also getting the antivirus protection as well. And then we have a third piece called the Wingu that provides the ability to do remote desktoping. So okay, let me just show you what this looks like. I'm going to minimize everything. Assume you can still see my screen. So this is the email client right here. So it kind of looks like Outlook. I got all the features that I would normally have. I can even go into, the GAL if I needed to. I can double click here and go into the GAL and look at other ways to contact this person, other files and meetings that I've shared with this person. I've got all access to all of my folders, all my groups, everything that I would have, but it's all containerized. So the cool thing about this is I don't need VPN. So if I take this laptop and I go to Starbucks, as soon as I connect to Wi-Fi or cellular, then my emails just start to sync. I don't have to worry about VPN and how that gets dropped all the time and reconnecting. I don't have to worry about that. But the company doesn't have to worry about the data in here, because if I, for example, take this and I right click on here, copy that data, and then maybe if I move, so I got Word here that's local on my local machine. So this is not protected by this desktop. Now if I right click here, I don't have the ability to paste because we've blocked it. There's no paste option here. Right? So that's the DLP. That's the data leakage protection. That it just doesn't allow me to take corporate data and use it in a personal application. And the same thing is true if I had any attachments. So if I have this message has attachments, they all stay. If I download that, it's all going to stay in the secure enclave. It's not going to be exposed to the native operating system. If I want to view it or edit it, it has to be done within here. And so the company retains access and control to that. And the really kind of cool part about it is the browser. So even though this is two different windows, it kind of feels like just two different applications. They're part of the same application, and they have the same restrictions. So I couldn't even if I copied this, I can't paste that out because it's all in the secure enclave. But the coolest part for me is I don't have to worry about VPN if I want to get to my intranet. If I want to get to any of the internal web applications, I'm already connected. I just browse to the URL and I connect there. And the remote desktop is a kind of good example of that. So I press one button, I get behind the firewall, and now I can remote desktops. So in here now, again, it's another window, but that's just so I can have multiple windows at the same time because it feels like a Windows application. This is still part of the secure solution. So none of the data in here can leave here. It stays in here. And what this part of the solution does is gives me access to files, so I can go into here and access all of my work office applications that are local. I've got a number of applications that have been made available to me. And then my workspace are just my favorite applications, my most recently used applications, as well as most recently files. And you'll see here, I can access either applications themselves that are made virtual to me, or I can just go into a whole desktop. And then, once I'm in a desktop, I can do whatever application I want. The way I use this myself is when I'm on the road with my iPad and I got a mouse and keyboard and iPad, and I use this to access Outlook. And then I have actual real Outlook on my iPad, so it's kind of cool. So here's, you see I started Word application, multiple applications. And another really cool kind of auditing thing that we allow with this is you can record the session. So if it's a hypersensitive application like an accounting software or something like that, you can record the session. And everything's already audited anyway. Every person that logs in, every time they log in, what applications they use. But in certain scenarios, if you wanted to, you could actually video record the actual session, and that gets saved so the administrator will have that for auditing purposes. So if I needed to get in here for a desktop, you see it's got single sign-on. It knows who I am already. It's logging me in. It's very easy and simple to get deployed, and it works really well over low bandwidth scenarios as well. So let me get back to the presentation, and I think I'm almost finished up here. Let me get this out of the way. All right, I'll do it this way. I can't start. Oh, Shift 5. There we go. So there's that solution. I'll leave it in here for reference. The last thing I'll end on is just the importance of communication. And I mentioned it earlier. We do provide a tool for this. It's called BlackBerry Ad Hoc, and it's a full life cycle of crisis communication, including crisis management. So it includes the communication as well as two-way information from users, integration with other agencies. So if you had a certain scenario that you wanted to include police or other authorities, you can include them. And then it also allows for the secure delivery of like continuity plans and backup plans and all that stuff. So there's an app for it. A lot of the governments use this, including the Canadian government. 85% of the U.S. government is deployed with this. So anytime there's a government mass communication to inter-agencies or just internal that uses the BlackBerry system, and then I know it's used in Canada as well. It really speeds up instead of using a call tree and that kind of stuff. It's really useful, especially in this scenario where we've seen customers using it, where something like this COVID-19 stuff is growing so fast and all around the world. Organizations want to really understand, especially big organizations like BlackBerry. We have offices everywhere in the world, and we don't know kind of what's the scenario of our people. We know what's going on in the news, but we don't know how our people are. So our BlackBerry group, security incident group would send out a mass alert asking everybody, do you have this symptoms? What's your status? That kind of stuff. And as people respond, everything is tracked and mapped. So from the headquarters now, HR can see in a map view, where do we have any hotspots, of user symptoms and people getting sick and things like that. And then they can really focus their energy and efforts and resources on addressing those areas that need it, first as they expand out that support. So again, I'll leave that in there for reference as well. And with that, I think I might have gone a little bit over my time, but I think we have some time left for Q&A, Allison, or is that something that we're doing, Q&A?
Yeah. So
okay, great.
So thank you, Alex. If anybody has any questions, please type them in your questions box there. And we do have a question. One question that we have is best way to get rid of malware.
Well, the best way to get rid of malware is to reformat, re-image the machine. That's what an organization would do, is they would just take it and re-image it. But obviously, there are tools for that. What we do, for example, when we go on site with a new customer, before we even deploy our security software, we'll want to do a scan and make sure that nothing's already there. And if it is, obviously going to use tools. I don't want to make recommendations of specific vendors, but there are tools that can be used to get rid of that. What I can do is maybe I can dig up some stuff and send it. We're sending this presentation after to everyone. Let me see what I can find that's kind of broad enough for you without giving specific. I can't give you specific instructions depending on the machine or what kind of malware it is. There's different approaches to get rid of it depending on what the malware is. But having a good software AV malware system in place to prevent that in the first place is even better. So as soon as it gets cleaned, you want to deploy something like that and provide that guidance to your users as well. So let me take a note here, and I'll send something after that gives just kind of general broad tips on how to approach that and what tools are available. Okay,
great. Thanks, Alex. That appears to be the only question. So if that's it, then I want to thank you very much, Alex, for spending your time and sharing your expertise with all of us today. Many of us are working from home, so it's important to ensure that our teams are safe from the cybersecurity standpoint. So thank you. As I mentioned, there will be a follow-up email. The attendees of this webinar will get a link to the recording, as well as a copy of Alex's presentation and any additional information that he would like to share with you. We will send that out in the next couple of days. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Alex, again, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.